Welcome. This is a brief introduction to the 5 preliminary practices, and we'll start with the opening prayers. Shoma chuji anji podrana toksen sanji kanji konyi rasame shulka muzame stunza sae lama namla solade girba sanji chiwa shita nyamba drupa shubla tanta sanjine manere dambe chanso do chanso shabla solade lame josme chanso doje shaka guru palma shulaji shedri chinga kewe nyuku tanta drupa tanjina drupa Ranji lame drambe kaje kosme jaro shidru lazo rale jana nipre tuyo ilmi jivare shinji lo. Homage to Sakyamuni Buddha, homage to His Holiness Trungpa Arik Rinpoche, homage to His Holiness Lama Achuk Rinpoche, homage to Gyalwe Nyugu Rinpoche. Everybody raise bodhicitta to benefit countless suffering sentient beings. We're beginning this brief talk on the preliminary practices, and these preliminary practices are very, very important. If you think of all the masters of the past who are practicing Tibetan Buddhism, especially if we're talking here with respect to the Ngondro in terms of the Longsal Ngondro and also the Longchen Yintig Ngondro, if we think about the past lineage masters, all the past great masters, all of them practice these lineage or these preliminary practices. And why did they practice these preliminary practices? Because they are so very important. If you think of Patrul Rinpoche, he listened to these teachings 25 times from his perfect teacher, Jigme Gyalwe Nyugu. And there's a very, very special book, and I suggest whoever's doing the preliminaries that you practice or get a lot of theory and information from this book, The Words of My Perfect Teacher. It was written by Patrul Rinpoche, and he was explaining the teachings given to him by his perfect teacher, Gyalwe Nyugu Rinpoche. And I think it was translated by Dilgo Khyentse. Now, Dilgo Khyentse as well, a very, very famous practitioner, and he, until he was old, apparently was still practicing Ngondro practices. Sometimes people ask and they say, should we really practice this, or is this just a cultural thing? No, it's not. It's really important practices. What are the purposes of the practice? The purpose of the practice is to transform our mind. And these are specific practices that have been recommended and practiced by all of these great masters of the past. I don't think that they were sitting there and decided, everybody's asking a lot of questions, so let's just think of something to give them to do that'll keep them out of the way for a while. Definitely not. These were definitely practices that are designed to help to transform our mind, to transform these negative habits of ours and adopt positive habits. And they work. I think this is also very important. These practices have assisted many students on the path of Tibetan Buddhism. And many of the students who have practiced these practices have attained enlightenment. If we just look, for instance, if we look at Yachin Gar, that was the monastery of His Holiness Lama Achuk, and His Holiness Lama Achuk, he followed his perfect teacher. He followed Trungpa Arik Rinpoche, who was a wandering yogi, but who was really, apparently, a really incredible practitioner. And At some stage, Trulga Arik Rinpoche said to him, and this was just after the Cultural Revolution, so he followed Trulga Arik Rinpoche throughout the Cultural Revolution, and I think he followed him for 40 years, and he really had a lot of devotion towards his guru. And Trulga Arik Rinpoche said to His Holiness Lama Achok Rinpoche that he must start a monastery. And so he did. He started with 6 students. And by the time he passed away, or he attained Parinirvana in 2011 at Yachen Gar, there were more than 10,000 resident nuns and monks, and he had hundreds and thousands of students. And this is really a testament to how special these teachings are and how special the lineage is. And it's very important also to have a very pure lineage and to follow a pure lineage. So really anybody that's following these teachings, the Longsal Nyingpo, the Longsal Nyingpo Ngondro, the Longsal Ngondro and the Longchen Yintik, really are very fortunate, and do apply yourself. Don't think of it as some kind of obstacle that has to be overcome. And so, just going back to His Holiness Lama Achok Rinpoche, he was really a very special teacher, and through his teachings, through his guidance at Yachen Gar, many students attained enlightenment, and many students significantly progressed on the path of their practice. So really, what is valuable here is that we know that we have a working method. And I think this is very important. Sometimes today, we like all of these modern day exercises or practices, and they might be very interesting, they might be very helpful. However, if they've been around for the last 20 or 30 years, how many students have attained enlightenment through them? I think this is very important to ask ourselves if we are on the path to enlightenment. If we're just interested in attaining some efficiency, effectiveness, more awareness, more calm mind, peaceful mind, happy mind, then maybe that is different. However, if you are following these paths and you're really practicing the preliminary practices, the Ngondro, for the purpose of establishing a very good foundation in the practices and attaining enlightenment, my suggestion is rather follow something that works. And these are practices that have proven to work over hundreds of years, and they have produced or have been part of the practices of some really most incredible teachers like His Holiness Trulga Arik Rinpoche, His Holiness Lama Achok Rinpoche, His Holiness Gyaltsen Nyingpo Rinpoche. So these practices, we know that they work, and this is very important. Of course, it also depends on how well we apply ourselves. No matter how good the teachings are, if we don't apply ourselves and we don't practice according to the teachings, according to the practices, then maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult to attain enlightenment. What many people do is they say, oh, these teachings, these practices look very interesting, but I still like this habit of mine or that habit of mine, so let me incorporate it into these practices. And then what are we doing? We're just really perpetuating some habits, which are samsaric habits. And so what do? We keep ourselves revolving around in samsara. And what's possible as well is that these very effective and very special teachings also aren't that effective in entering into our mind stream, because we've also included these negative habits or these samsaric habits into the practices. So just be aware of this. Best is to follow the practices according to the practices. And so these teachings, don't view them as a burden. They're not a burden. They're very special practices. They're very important practices. And so really apply oneself. Really do your best in these practices. Then we can really establish a good foundation. There's a possibility within doing these practices as well that we can attain enlightenment. They do include renunciation. They do include bodhicitta. Within bodhicitta, there's the practice of wisdom. And so if you realize wisdom emptiness, you've got the opportunity of attaining enlightenment. After these practices, if you're following the Longsal Nyingpo or you're following the Longchen Yintik, Rinpoche has always offered that if you follow these instructions, if you have the opportunity to meet him, you're very welcome to ask for additional pith instructions. So then there's a series of pith instructions afterwards, and these are individual pith instructions that Rinpoche will give to the students if they've practiced and finished these preliminary practices, and if they've practiced them properly. Of course, he may go to say to some people, well, I feel that you haven't practiced these sufficiently, go and do certain practices again. However, approach these practices with great enthusiasm, not as something to overcome so that I can get those additional pith instructions, direct pointing at the mind pith instructions. These pith instructions, or these practices, are very, very important. They're very, very special. If you think about it, renunciation from samsara is included in these practices, and the wish to benefit all sentient beings is in these practices, and the understanding and the practice of wisdom in emptiness. So they really are very, very comprehensive practices. And if you establish a very good foundation in these, even if we don't attain enlightenment in this lifetime, we will have established very good habits, really established a lot of practice in transforming our mind stream, getting them absorbed into our mind stream, which will stand us in very good stead for future lives. We'll have absorbed or included these very special qualities that are innate within ourselves, and these qualities we'll take from lifetime to lifetime. And so really don't look down on these practices. And enthusiasm is very, very important. If we do something with enthusiasm, then we've really got a good opportunity of following through. To establish that enthusiasm, one is to really understand the benefit of the Dharma, the benefit of the practices, the benefit of renunciation and bodhicitta, and of wisdom, emptiness, and attaining realization and liberation. If we have that as our goal, so that gives us our direction, then, well, this is really a worthwhile project. This is really something very, very special. And then it will give us a lot of energy and drive to continue practicing. And when we're encouraged or enthusiastic about something, then what happens is that no matter what obstacles we have, we're willing to carry on. We might have difficulties, people might be giving us a hard time, there might be all sorts of obstacles, political obstacles, economic obstacles, physical obstacles. However, we'll be willing to follow through. It's just like if you really love something, if you love singing or dancing, or if you love a sport, or if you really want to learn how to drive. As many times as you may fail, you'll get up again. And then you'll carry on. You'll face difficulties, but this is part of the process. This is part of the learning. Wonderful. This is a new experience, and then let me carry on. So there was one great sportsman, and he broke his leg. He was playing rugby, and when he broke his leg, he was playing for the national side, and then he managed to fix his leg. He came back, played for the national side again. His leg broke again, but he carried on. He came up again and started playing again. Got up again, and once his leg was fixed, he carried on playing. And some people interviewed him and said, "Wow, it's quite incredible that you are playing again." And he said, "Yes. What's important is not how many times we fall down. What's important is how many times we get up again." In the practices, there will be difficulties, there will be obstacles. Sometimes we may feel a little bit tired, sometimes we may lose a little bit of enthusiasm. But then what do? We remind ourselves the importance of practicing the Dharma, and then also because we have that enthusiasm, we'll be willing to carry on. And then we've really got a lot of opportunity to be successful in achieving the goal. It's like climbing a mountain as well. Don't think that this mountain is too high, it's too difficult, and I'll never get to the top, so I'll never start. Right? But just think, I really wish to get to the top of that mountain, and I'm going to make a really great adventure of this, and I'm going to go step by step, and I'll enjoy every one of the steps on the path. As I go along up the mountain, there'll be new climate, there'll be new scenery, many interesting things. On the way, I'll meet many new different people. It's going to be very interesting. So the destination is still the top of the mountain. However, we can really enjoy and appreciate our journey. And as we go foot by foot, step by step, we might be quite surprised after a little while. Oh, I've actually escalated the mountain. I've climbed up it quite a bit higher and quite a bit higher. And in this way, it's going to be much easier for us to be able to finish these practices and really attain realization in these practices. Otherwise, what people say, if they see, oh, there's 100,000 of each of these practices, oh, this is going to be so difficult, it's going to take so long. If you already have that mind set, then already you have an obstacle. But if you just say, every 2 days, let me go for another 2 days, let me just go for another 2 days, and start like this, and then those initial difficulties and hardships maybe are not going to cause so many problems, and you'll be more enthusiastic to start and to carry on. And it is important to also have a commitment, really say, I really want to really finish these practices and do them as properly as possible. And when we start, we may feel a little bit uncomfortable, we won't be used to it. Anything that we do that's new, it takes a little bit of time for us to get used to it, to adapt to the new ways of doing things. So in the beginning, just realize that it might take a little bit of time to adapt. Give yourself that space. And then also when it comes to practice, if you can start straight away and do many hours. However, for some people, this might be very difficult. It's like for myself as well. The first time I went to gym, I had some friends that were really, really strong. They're very, very muscular guys. They went to the gym very often, and I was quite a skinny guy. And I decided to go with them to go and do some gym training, some weight training. I said to them, what can I do? And they said, well, do these shoulder exercises, do these shoulder exercises. So I thought, okay, let me do these. And I did. For the next 2 hours, I did these shoulder exercises. And I felt okay. And the next morning when I woke up, I thought I'd been hit by a car or a bus. I couldn't move. And for 3 days, I couldn't even lift my arms above shoulder height. I was so stiff. It was so painful. And so, why do I give this example? It's because sometimes when we're starting these practices as well, sometimes for some people, if we start too enthusiastically and we want to just go straight ahead and do weeks and weeks without stopping, we might find that we really are enthusiastic for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours every day, but then after the 3rd or 4th day, we might feel very tired and it might be a little bit too much. And then for the next few days or a little while, we lose interest or we lose energy. So also in the beginning, maybe get fit for your practices as well. What do I mean getting fit? Start maybe every day for 1 hour, and then increase it to 2 hours, and then increase it to 3 hours. Maybe over the weekend, if you have the time, say, okay, I'll start with one morning over the weekend, and then start both mornings, Saturday and Sunday. And if you increase the whole day, Saturday and Sunday, and that way, it's not going to feel like you're going to be so exhausted after your practices. And then slowly your fitness and your ability to persevere with your practices is going to grow. Of course, if you can start straight away and you can just go hours and hours and continue the practices, well, you have really great merit, and that is really fantastic, and do it that way. Also, what will help us continue in the practices and that we don't stop are the practices of renunciation, the outer preliminary.